Hey, Church on the Move West family. My name's Chuck, and I'm one of the pastors here at the church. And I would just like to say welcome. Whether it's your first time ever, or if you're joining our growing online community, we are just honored to call you family. And if it is your first time ever, we'd like to send you a cup of coffee from Starbucks. And the way that you can receive that is by texting the word WEST to 23101. Hey, let's get to the message. And here's what I hope when you hear it. I hope that it better equips you to find the purpose and plan that God has for your life. And then in turn, you can go out to the world that you live in and work in, and you can help introduce people to the real Jesus. Let's get to the message.
So I was at home yesterday. I was talking to my daughter, my middle kid. Everybody else was gone. It was just the two of us. And she was doing some of those magnetic tiles on the floor. And you know how kids are, just randomly. She's like, "Dad, you remember when we went to the salt plain?" And I was like, yeah. So like in July, my family, we did a little overnight trip in Oklahoma. So we went out to some of the different state parks, and there's kind of this salt plain area in Oklahoma. I don't know if you've ever been to it. It's bizarre. It's kind of like you step onto like Mars or something. It's this different world. And so she's like, "You remember that?" And I was like, "Yeah, I remember that." And she goes, "Man, Dad, like my brain, like it was like it hurt when we went." And I was like, "What?" And she's like, she goes, "Dad, it blew my mind." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Why did it blow your mind?" And she's like, "It was just so cool to be somewhere new and somewhere different." And I was like, "You know what, you're right. It is cool whenever you get to go somewhere new and somewhere different." In fact, my wife and I, just a few days ago, we were talking about, I'm kind of coming up on a season where for work and for personal and for family reasons, I have some trips planned, some different travel dates to go to different parts of our country, see different cities. And I love that. I love to see new things and new places and how people do things differently. And we're in this series called What's Next. We're traveling through the book of Acts, but really we kind of got to the part of the book where there's this guy named Paul. Paul's a missionary, Paul's a church planner, and Paul goes on what we call these missionary journeys. And so kind of the second half of the book is a lot of Paul traveling around from city to city into these different places. But to this point, we've kind of seen just a pattern develop. Is that Paul, he goes to a city, he preaches in the synagogue to the Jews first. After he preaches to them, then he goes out into the marketplace or the streets or wherever he preaches to the Gentiles. And then sometimes they believe, sometimes they don't believe, and then he goes on to another city. That's kind of been the pattern. In fact, we're in Acts chapter 17 today, and we're going to skip down to the second half because the first half, Paul goes to Thessalonica, super influential, important city, preaches in the synagogue. The Jews there and the religious leaders do not like his teachings. And so he goes and he preaches to the Gentiles. They're kind of intrigued, but the Jewish leaders actually, they kind of run Paul out of town. So Paul goes down the road to Berea. Same thing. He goes to the synagogue, teaches to the Jewish leaders. They're super intrigued. And in fact, it says that in Berea that they were reading the scriptures to see everything that he said. And to see, is what he's saying, is this true? Does this align with our scriptures? And as somebody who teaches on this stage, please be a church that does that. Please be a church that whenever we teach something that you get your Bible out and say, is that what that says? Does that align with what God's word says? Because here's the thing, I'm human and sometimes I'm dumb, okay? And so I'm gonna get something wrong every once in a while. So would you make sure that what we're saying is true? And so they're doing that, and they're kind of interested in what Paul's saying. He goes and he preaches to the Gentiles, but the Thessalonica religious leaders are still mad at Paul, so they come down the road. They actually run him out of Berea as well. And so then we're going to jump into the story. At chapter 17, we're going to be in verse 15 to start. So it says, "Those who conducted Paul brought him as far as Athens, and after receiving a command from Silas and Timothy to come to him as soon as possible, they departed." So Paul goes down the road to the city of Athens, and the people that he's with, they get message they've got to go back, and so they leave. So we find Paul all alone here in the city of Athens. Now, maybe you've heard of Athens before. We have the Olympics going on right now, and that's, Athens is where the Olympics started. It's kind of this famous city, but in the day that Paul goes, it's still an intellectual city. It's still an influential city, but now it's part of the Roman Empire. It's kind of past its golden days. The golden days would have been when it was Plato and Socrates and Aristotle and all these famous philosophers, but it's still known to be the city where people are always, they're having these dialogue, and they care about the arts, and they care about, music and literature and all of these things. And Paul's an educated person. And Paul would have known of the city of Athens, and I'm guessing he's probably intrigued to go see it. He's probably excited to see what's this city all about. And so Paul's alone, city of Athens, and we see what he sees in verse 16. It says, "Now while Paul was waiting for them at Athens, his spirit was provoked." Some translations say that he was deeply troubled. Some say that he was very distressed. Well, what is provoking his spirit? Well, it tells us. He says, because he saw that the city was full of idols. Now, there's historians who say that they believe that there was maybe as many as 30,000 idols just in the city of Athens. One ancient historian, he has this quote. He says, it was easier to find a god than a man in the city of Athens. And so Paul shows up and he looks around and all he sees is these idols. And we hear that Paul is provoked. It means he has this emotional response. He is brokenhearted by what he sees in this city. Why? Because he sees these people who are looking for truth. They're searching for God, but they're searching in all of the wrong places. Now, you and I, we may come across a passage like this in our Bible and we may say, okay, I get that people used to worship idols and that was important, but that doesn't really happen to us today, right? We're Americans. We live in the 21st century that we can kind of skip over these idol passages. And first and foremost, I would say, well, we may not see it here in America. I mean, I'm sure there's some pockets of it, but as a normal American, we're not going to run into it. But I would say that there are places around our world today, present day, that continue to worship idols. That they continue to worship things that are made from stone or wood or certain types of metal. And these things, these objects that are man-made, that they are a symbolism of a god. And people will put them up in their homes. They'll put them up in their places of worship. They will pray to these things. They will worship these things. That's very much still happening in our world today. But for us as Americans, we have to stop and say, okay, so what is an idol? Like if I'm not putting one up on the shelf in my house, what does it mean for an idol? And so just a simple definition, what I would say is an idol is anything that serves as a substitute for God. Now, if we begin to define it that way, it doesn't take much for us to say, well, we may not be worshiping things of stone or wood or gold, but we've probably put some idols within our lives today. And some of these maybe you've heard before, you've thought about before. It's easy to find things like wealth. If I can just pursue enough money, if I can just have enough possessions and enough comfort, then that's what I need in my life, right? That's where I'm going to find my value. If I didn't have that position, that power, that fame, whatever it may be, that thing at work or that we want people to look up to us, if I can get that, right? That becomes this idol that we're pursuing with all of our effort. It becomes our identity. We put it into relationships. We put it into sex. We put it into things like sports. If my team, like my value is found if my team does well or doesn't do well. When I think that I see for us as Americans, and I'm always afraid to say this because I don't want people to interpret it wrong. But man, I looked at the way that some people prioritize their family. Now, families are important. I have 3 kids. I have a wife. I love them. Families are a gift from God. But I look at some people, and I'm like, you are finding your value and your meaning in your kids. And it's, man, how are my kids doing in school? And when are my kids going to grow up? And are they going to get a job? And who are they going to marry? And what are they, like you've put everything into this beautiful thing, this gift from God, but we've made this into something that it wasn't intended to be. And so, Paul's in this city. He's provoked, he's upset at what he sees. And so the question is, how does Paul respond when he has this emotional reaction to the city of Athens? So we read on verse 17. It says, so he reasoned in the synagogue. So he's following his same pattern. He goes to the synagogue first with the Jews and the devout persons, and in the marketplace every day, and with those who happen to be there. Then it says, some of the Epicurean and Stoic philosophers also conversed with him, and some said, what does this babbler wish to say? Others said, he seems to be a preacher of foreign divinities, because he was preaching Jesus and the resurrection. They're like, ooh, here's some new statues we can build. Jesus and the resurrection. Let's add them to the 30,000, right? And they took him and they brought him to the Areopagus, saying, may we know what this new teaching is that you are presenting? For you bring some strange things to our ears. We wish to know, therefore, what these things mean. And listen to verse 21. Man, I think this speaks to our culture today. It says, now all the Athenians and the foreigners who live there would spend their time in nothing except telling or hearing of something new. What's the new thing we can try? What's the new thing we can believe? What's right? What's the new diet? What's the new app? What's the thing that's going to make us happy and finally make things right in our life? And so what I notice here, first and foremost, is that Paul has this emotional response. He's troubled by what he sees, but do you see the way he acts towards the people? It's thoughtful. It's intelligent. He doesn't go out blasting them emotionally. Instead, he says, okay, how do I connect with these people? And there's two major groups that we hear about in this city. These would have been kind of the leaders and the types of thoughts. And one of them is called the Stoics, and one of them is called the Epicureans. And so I'm going to give you really quickly just kind of bullet points of what these two groups will believe. And some of you are like, why are we getting a history lesson? Because what I think we're going to see is that even though this was a few thousand years ago, that many of the thoughts of these groups, they're not that much different than the way that many of us, many of the neighbors, many of our coworkers, people that we come in contact with today, the way that they think and they behave in their lives. So first, the Stoics. What do the Stoics believe? They believe that there was a supreme God, but they believe this in a pantheistic way. What that means is they believe that God and the universe were one and the same. So everything is God, okay? So it's just all around us. And so if you begin to believe that, what that leads to is believing that the world was determined by fate. Whatever's going to happen is going to happen. You can't do anything about it. You can't control it. The universe has already decided it. You just kind of have to live within whatever's going to happen. So that leads you to believe that humans should resign themselves to the world and learn to endure pain. Just get through life because there's nothing that you can do about it. If they had a motto, their motto would be this. It would be grin and bear it. There's nothing you can do about it. Do you know anybody who lives by the motto of just grin and bear it? There's nothing you can do about it. In fact, last night, so we did Saturday night church, and I told my wife, I said, hey, I'm preaching this weekend. Let's get some Chinese after Saturday night service. And so we went over, I was driving, I had my two girls with me to go pick up the Chinese food that we ordered for dinner. And between here and there, 11-minute drive, I think I passed like 5 dispensaries on the way there. And I've got my girls, and these signs are lit up. And one of them, it said cannabis, and they thought it was cannibal, and so they thought it was hilarious. And I was like, well, that's actually cannabis. Do you know what that is? And so they're like, and so I was like, well, it's marijuana. And so we began to talk about it and what that meant. And then there's another place, and my daughter goes, why does it say wellness? And I was like, that's a great question. Let me explain. And I was saying about that, I just didn't get out of my head after that of how many people are using substances in our culture today because they're just trying to get through life. If I can just disconnect for a little bit, if I can just numb myself for a little bit, if I've got to go through another day, so I need this to get me through. So then there's this other group. There's these Epicureans. They're kind of the opposite side of what they believe. So what do the Epicureans believe? Is they believe that there are gods, but these gods are distant, with no interest or influence over human affairs. Today, this is what we would call a deist. A deist is the view that God created everything. God kind of spun the world. He put it into motion, and then he just sat back in his rocking chair, and he's like, all right, whatever happens from here is good. So what that leads to is just this belief that the world is completely chance and random. If something good happens, that's awesome. If something terrible happens, what are you going to do? That's it, life is just random. And so if that's your view, then what that leads to is this idea that humans should pursue pleasure and avoid pain at all costs. Everything you do should be so you can experience pleasure. You can have joy and fun and be entertained and be happy and not have any pain in your life. If they had a motto, their motto would be, if it feels good, do it. Man, there's some people living by the motto, if it feels good, do it. We are making decisions as a culture around this idea. If it feels good to me, then I should do it. Right? How I spend my time, how I spend my money, who I'm in a relationship with, all these things. If it feels good, that's what I should do. Now, we may not know anybody today that calls himself an Epicurean or a Stoic, but there's a rise of something in our culture, something that we call the nuns. Now, I'm not talking about the little ladies with like the black, headdress thing from Catholicism. I'm talking about when people fill out their form, their official form and it says, what's your religious affiliation? And there's a box there that says none. And the number of people that are checking that box that says none is dramatically on the rise. It's going up to these people that say, I don't care about God. I don't have any religious affiliation. I'm just doing my own thing. I'm just trying to get through life. I'm just seeking pleasure. I'm trying to avoid pain. I don't believe in these higher powers. I don't believe in these religious gatherings. None of that makes any sense to me. Back in September, I was in the city of Las Vegas. I don't know if you've ever been to the city of Las Vegas before. I was there for a pastor's conference, okay? So don't judge me, all right? It's really fun when I tell people, hey, I'm going to a pastor's conference. They say, where is that? I say, it's in Vegas. And they're like, no, those two, that doesn't go together. The truth is, I have a long history with the city of Vegas. About 15 years ago, as a college student, I interned there, and I lived there for 7 months. And so I still have some connections there, still have some relationships there. And so I was back with one of those pastors, and he had this gathering of executive pastors and lead pastors from different parts of the country. And so we got together in just this really, really encouraging time together. But then before I flew out, I had some free time, and I was like, I hadn't been to Vegas for 5 or 6 years. So I was like, I'm going to go down and see the Strip. Now, I went down at like 10 in the morning, okay, so it's daylight, but if you've been to Vegas multiple times, they'll put up a whole new building, they'll tear it. It's incredible some of the stuff that they do and they change and they build. So I was like, I'll go see what's happening. So, man, I went down there and just walking around, just the heaviness that I felt, because I'm down there in the morning and yet you see people sitting at these casino tables and you're like, I bet that person's been there all night long. That person's been there for 12 hours and spent thousands of dollars in pursuit of something. You walk by these stores where they're selling $5,000 purses, right? And you see these incredible restaurants with amazing menus and expensive meals. And you see people walking around with these alcoholic drinks that are like this tall, and it's 100 degrees out, and it's 10 in the morning, and you're like, you're going to die. Okay, that's not a good choice today. And just this pursuit of pleasure. And how many people, it's like they save up their money to go to Vegas for a weekend. If I can just get away from my job, if I can just get away from my family, if I can just, right, there's the saying that what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. If I can just go do that, and maybe I can, have this meaningful experience, this great moment, and people pursue it. And if I can win enough money, and if I can have sex with the right people, and all these things happen, and it's kind of the epitome of all of it. But then you can't help it, if you walk around, this is true of any city, but it's more on display in a place like Vegas, when you walk around and you begin to notice some other things, especially in the daylight. You notice some of the streets, like if you turn down a certain street, like, oh, it's kind of dirty, right? There's a bunch of trash around here. Or one thing I learned when I was interning there, people will stand out with cards, and you don't want one of these cards. It has pictures on it that you don't want to see, and it's an invitation for women and all these other things. And so, but your first reaction is when they're trying to get your attention is just to look at the ground. And I learned, don't look at the ground, because that's where everybody throws the ones that they didn't want. So then you're like, oh no, what am I? Right, and so there's just stuff littered all over the ground. And you start thinking about, man, somebody had to build all these buildings, and somebody has to clean these places, and somebody has to prepare these meals. And all these people, there's so many workers here right now who are they're living by that stoic view of, right, I've just got to get through another day. If I can just survive through another day. And whether it's Epicurean or Stoic or the nuns or whatever we want to label them, there's so many people who are living hopeless and meaningless lives. And they're searching for something more. They're desperate for something more. They're just trying to find it in the wrong places. So Paul begins to spend time around these people. They're intrigued by what he says, and so they take him over to the Areopagus, over to the assembly to share about his gods. And so Paul begins in verse 22. He says, Paul's standing in the midst of the Areopagus. He said, men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you are very religious. What an interesting way for Paul to start. For I passed along and observed the objects of your worship. I found an altar with this inscription, to the unknown God. What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you. And then Paul goes on from there and he preaches the gospel. He preaches the gospel in a different way than he preaches it in the synagogue. Not because it's a different gospel, but because he knows it's a different people that need to hear it in a different way. And so he starts with what they know. He says, okay, you guys got a lot of idols. Here's one that doesn't have a name. Let me tell you about the God that you don't No. Paul takes this intelligent, thoughtful response to this broken and hurting city and people. And so how does this go? What's the response? We can skip down to verse 32. It's pretty much what we see everywhere else. Now, when they heard of the resurrection of the dead, some mocked. It's hard to believe that people rise from the dead, right? But others said, we will hear you again about this. So Paul went out from their midst, and some of the men joined him and believed, among whom were also were Dionysius the Areopagite and a woman named Damaris, and others with them. So the same trend, we see that some people believe, some people don't believe, and then Paul goes on about his business to the next place. And so you may say, okay, Ryne, that's great. That's an interesting story. That's really cool. What does that mean for us today? Why is that? Why did the Holy Spirit include that in the Bible? What do we learn from this story? How does it apply to us? Because we don't live in a city full of idols. We don't live in the city of Las Vegas where it's obvious that people are pursuing all of these things that aren't from God. In fact, we live in Tulsa, right? We live in the Bible Belt, maybe even the buckle of the Bible Belt. So what does this story mean for us? In fact, a couple weeks ago, I had a friend in town, and I had Bulls Thunder tickets. So I'm a Bulls fan, and I jokingly said to my friend, I said, hey, I've got Bulls tickets. If you want to come out, you can have the other one. He's like, all right. And so he lives in Illinois. He's a friend of mine. He's a pastor. We went to college together. So he flew in, hung out for a few days, got to show him around our church. We talked to ministry and stuff a lot. But we went over to the Thunder in the Bulls game, and the game was getting ready to start. And I don't know if you've been to a game or not, but everybody stood up and they said, okay, it's time for the invitation. And I nudged him, and I go, hey, by the way, we pray before games. And he was shocked. He couldn't believe it. In fact, the next day, he goes, dude, I'm still thinking about that. Like, how did that start? How do they even pray before an NBA game? Like, is that legal? Are you allowed to do that? And I go, I don't know, man. Like, dude, this is Oklahoma. Like, this is just kind of what we do, right? We live in a very Christian kind of saturated culture, and so it's easy for us to begin to believe, well, everybody kind of knows about Jesus, and everybody believes the things that I believe, and what I've found is when you really begin to dig into that, maybe it's not as true as we think it is. In fact, I found this Gallup research poll from 2015. At that time, they said that Oklahomans, so the entire state, they said that 39% of Oklahomans were in a religious gathering on a weekly basis. Now, a couple things that we need to know about this. First of all, it says religious gathering. This isn't just limited to Christian churches. So this would include Jews going to the synagogue. This would include Muslims who are practicing Islam. This would include anybody who's some sort of religion that gathers together with people. So all of a sudden, it's not even 39% of Christians. That number's lower. And then we notice that this is from 2015. It's the most recent I could find. But if you know anything about the trends of church attendance since 2015, at best, they've been plateaued, but often on decline across our country. So this number's even lower. And then it was pre-COVID. COVID, right, guys? You know, it kind of accelerated every trend that we were already seeing. And what many churches happen is they shut down. And by the way, when I was at that gathering of pastors in Vegas, I was sitting with some pastors from California. And so like, how long were you guys closed for COVID? And I was like, well, the church I was at, I was like, about a month and a half or so. And they were like some of them had just started meeting again in September. Like they were like a month in. And so what a lot of churches are seeing is that 50, 60% of the people that were there before came back, and the others they just haven't come back, and they're not coming back. And so we have this even steeper decline post-COVID. And then, this is just my opinion, but this is a research poll where they're asking people how often you go to church. What I've found from being in ministry for long enough is that people tend to think that they do more than they do, you know? People tend to think that they're at church more and pray more and give more maybe than we actually do. And so I'm not saying anybody lied on this poll, but I'm just saying we're optimistic sometimes about our behaviors. And so all of a sudden, this 39% isn't very convincing, right? But then within this article, they also talked to a guy. He was the lead for the Tulsa Baptist Metro Network. And he said that might be true. 39% might be true across the state in these rural areas. He said, but what we see in Tulsa is it's probably 20 to 22% of people. Now, if we start to think about this, Tulsa just recently in the metro, So if we throw in every city around us, if we throw in Sand Springs and Sapulpa and Bixby and Broken Arrow and Wausau, all that, we're over 1 million people. So just for easy math, let's do 1 million people at 20%. That means this weekend, 800,000 people are not at church. I don't know about you, but that begins to provoke something in my spirit. When I say that out loud, man, that distresses me. That troubles me. And look, church attendance is not the end all. Church attendance does not mean that you know God or don't know God, but it's an indicator. It's a pretty strong indicator about what our priorities are, about the things that we value. And as we talked about idols earlier, I think we could probably spend some time saying, what are idols in the state of Oklahoma or in the city of Tulsa? And I think sometimes even just being the name of a Christian. Yeah, I'm a Christian. Yeah, I follow Jesus. Those things are important to me. But those things don't have any impact in the decisions that people make, any impact into how they spend their money or their time or how they choose relationships or any of that. It was important to my family, so it's important to me, but it doesn't actually impact me in any personal way. So when we start to think about those numbers, we say, yeah, we may not be Athens, we may not be Vegas, but there's a need here in our city. And we want to be a church that engages our city. You may say, well, Ryne, I don't live in Tulsa, right? I live in Sand Springs, or I live in Sapulpa, or I live in Manford, or Berry Hill, or Bixby, or whatever. And I would say, look, I don't care if you live in a place of 5,000 or a place of 5 million. God has placed you around people. And he's placed you around people who are desperate to know him, desperate to know truth, that are searching for something, and they can't find it, and they want this value and this meaning, and they're pursuing all of these other things. And so as a church, one of the things we've said is, man, we want to be a church that's engaged in our community, whatever that community is for you. In fact, we have this document. It's called The Church I See. I want to read one of the paragraphs from The Church I See. It says this. It says, the church I see is a church that's engaged in social transformation and cultural renewal. We seek to see his kingdom come, his will be done in Tulsa as it is in heaven in Berry Hill, as it is in heaven in Sand Springs, as it is in heaven in Sapulpa, as it is in heaven in Bixby, in Owasso, and wherever you come from. Therefore, because of all that, we will not be content with building our little Christian kingdom. We're not going to pull back. We're not going to disconnect, but rather we will engage in the issues of our communities. It's why we do things like First Saturday Serve. It's why we do things like Love Day, where we get everybody together and we send them all over the city to go out and do incredible things. It's why we talk about compassion offering all throughout the years. We want to be a church that's engaged in our community. But those things are First Saturday Serve, Love Day, compassion offering. Those things are great. Those things are not the end goal. Okay, those things are a great way to say, look, maybe you don't know where to serve. Here's a great place to start. Maybe you don't know what to give to. Here's a great place that you can give. We're going to give away over $1 million this year because we want to say, hey, compassion first. That's what matters to us. But those things are not the goal. The goal is that you would go into your workplace, into your community, into your neighborhood, into your school, into wherever God has placed you, and that you would take the kingdom of God with you. And that people would be able to experience the love and the truth and the mercy and the grace of God because they come in contact with you. So how do we do that? Well, I'm going to become a Baptist preacher for a couple minutes, okay? I've got 5 points, and they all have alliteration, okay? But I'm going to go through them in 5 minutes, all right? I promise we're going to be done real fast. But what I think we see in this passage is we see kind of this pattern, this thing that Paul lays out for us of just, man, if we would do these things, these really simple things, I think it could make a dramatic impact in our lives as we try to faithfully follow Jesus, but also in those around us. And so the first thing is this, is take a proper perspective. What I mean by that is we see Paul finds himself in the city of Athens alone. I love to travel alone. I don't know if you ever get the opportunity to do that. I love just being in airports, being able to just kind of look at what people are doing, right? How are people acting? So I'm picturing Paul, he's got his AirPods in, and he's just sitting back looking at the city of Athens. And what does he see? He sees beautiful statues, and he sees incredible artwork, and he sees these amazing buildings. And I'm sure he appreciated that. I'm sure he's like, wow, God, this is incredible, the things that you've made people to do. But he's not deceived. Why? Because Paul can see spiritually what's happening as well. He can see the brokenness. He can see the pursuit of God. He can see these people who are lost and desperate for truth. And his spirit is provoked. He's troubled. He's distressed. And I would just ask you, when's the last time that your heart was broken over the city of Tulsa? When's the last time your heart was broken over the city or the community, the neighborhood that you live in? When you look around and said, God, there are people here who don't know you. There are people who haven't been introduced to the real Jesus. So first we've got to take a proper perspective. What do we do after that? After that, we find places to connect with people. Now I hate this point because I'm an introvert and I would rather just go to my house and stay alone all the time. But what do we see Paul do? Paul goes into the synagogue with his people. Paul goes out into the marketplace and starts connecting with people there. He gets invited into the assembly with these intellectual thinkers. Paul will go wherever people will let him go. Why? Because he's forming relationships. He's sharing about who he is. He's sharing about the God that he knows. And I would just ask you, where can you go? What's that look like for you? Maybe it's coaching your kids' Little League team because it gets you around some people who don't know Jesus. Maybe it's going to that same coffee shop and starting to learn some names. Maybe this happens for you. Maybe you're like, man, it's happening at my break table at work every day. Like, I don't need to find anywhere. It's already there. Whatever that is, how are you coming in contact with people who don't believe what you believe, with people who are desperate for truth, who are hopeless and meaningless, they're pursuing pleasure, they're just trying to survive, whatever it may be? Where are you creating places to come in contact with people? And then, my favorite part, I almost made the whole message about this. Paul starts with the positive. He has this emotional response. He's upset, but he doesn't go in. He doesn't say, you guys are so stupid. 30,000 idols, how dumb can you be? This one doesn't even have a name on it. Like, what's wrong with you guys? Let me tell you how wrong you are. Instead he goes in, he says what? He says, oh, I can see you're very religious. He finds what they're doing well. He says, okay, you're pursuing God. You're trying to find truth. Okay, let me start here because I think I know something that you don't know. Whenever you're sitting down across from somebody, when you see opportunity, what is it? You can say, okay, this is good. Let's start here. I can see you're trying to be. I can see you're searching for something here. I can see, like, how can we find positive in people? We're not disconnecting from people. We're not dividing and saying you're with us or you're against us. We're saying, okay, I'm going to start here. I'm going to tell you about the gospel. That's the next thing is proclaim the gospel when given the opportunity. Paul starts spending time around people, and guess what? They ask him what he believes. He's not out with a bullhorn. He's not out with a sandwich board sign. He's not yelling at people. They say, hey, we want to know more about what you believe. If you start spending time around people, these opportunities are going to come. Maybe it happens when somebody's lost somebody that they love. The door opens for you to share the gospel. Maybe when it's your kids running into things at school, there's an opportunity for you to share the gospel. These moments come up in life. Be ready to share the gospel. Don't miss the opportunity. And maybe there's some relationship you're thinking about right now. You're like, oh, I missed it. It's going to happen again. Share the gospel when somebody gives you the opportunity. And then the last thing, this is just an encouragement to you, is don't push past your limits. Paul knew what his role was. Paul went to the people, he spent time with them, he shared the gospel, but he knows that he's not God. His job is not to save people. That's the work of God. That's the work of the Holy Spirit in people. He's going to present the gospel. It's the work of the Spirit that he's going to work in them to do something to change them. So Paul preaches, Paul spends time with people, and then it says some people believe, some people don't. It's the parable of the sower that Jesus tells about, that there's all these seeds that go about. Some grow up in healthy plants, a lot of them don't. We can't control that. All we can do is share the gospel in the appropriate way, let the Spirit work, and then know, okay, I've done what I can do. Maybe there's somebody in your life, man, you've been sharing for 5 years, 10 years, 15. You can't control. All you can do is when the opportunity comes, keep proclaiming the gospel. Believe that, man, God cares about cities. God cares about people. And in a city, we see it's this beautifulness and it's this brokenness all at the same time. And that's just a reflection of the people who build cities, that we are beautiful and we are broken all at the same time. And there are people around you that need the hope of the gospel. There are people around you that need to know the real Jesus. And I believe God has placed you right where he wants you to make an impact and to reach somebody with the gospel. Father, we thank you this morning that you are good, that you are working, that you are moving. Father, I thank you for each and every person in this room, Father. I don't know every name, I don't know every story, but you do, Father, and I know how you're working and how you're moving. Now, with every head bowed and every eye closed, we're going to take a moment, and I couldn't help but preaching to say, okay, when you have the opportunity to share the gospel, and today's message I didn't really lay out the gospel. I didn't talk about the cross. I didn't talk about Jesus and all the things he done. It's more about how do we be a good neighbor, how do we be a good friend, how do we be faithful followers of Jesus. But I don't want to just miss an opportunity. Just quickly, I want to say, if you've never made the decision to make Jesus the Lord of your life, and maybe it's nothing that I said during my message. Maybe something hit you during worship. Maybe something this week happened and you're like, I got to get myself to church. Something's got to change. Something's got to go on. And you're ready to make Jesus the Lord and the Savior of our life. We have people praying for you all around the room. What I'm going to ask you right now is, would you just raise your hand and say, yes, I want to make that decision today. Yes, I need to make Jesus the Lord and the leader of my life. Is that anybody this morning? Okay, Father, again, you are good and we love you. We don't deserve your grace. We don't deserve what you've poured out upon us. But Father, we're going to live in the best way that we can. Father, we're going to depend on you. We're going to go to the places that you send us, to the people that you send us. And Father, we're going to declare your goodness. We're going to declare the gospel of Jesus and what he has done for us. For that's where we get our strength and our power. And it's in the name of Jesus we pray. Amen.
Once again, we're so honored that you chose to join us today and listen to this message. If at any point during the message you felt a nudge from the Holy Spirit to make a decision, whatever that is, we want to walk with you through it. At Church on the Move, we realize how important our relationship with God is. Also, we realized how important it is that we have a relationship with each other. So we want to be in that part of the journey with you. So if you need prayer, someone to talk to, you can text West to 23101, and one of our prayer team will be glad to pray with you or visit with you. If you can sense our mission to introduce people to the real Jesus, and you'd like to partner with us in the giving of your tithes and offering, you can do that by texting the word give to 23101 and then follow the prompts. Hey, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then go ahead and follow us on Facebook. That way you can keep up to date on all the things we have going on at Church on the Move West. Hey, we typically do a blessing at the close of our services, and I want to do that today. It's out of number 6, verses 24 through 26. I'm going to read it to you. May the Lord bless you and protect you. May the Lord smile on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord show you his favor and give you his peace. Blessings.